Hello everybody, thank you for tuning in. It is Larson Edson. Today we are going to be talking about one of the African dinosaurs that is rumored to live in a region of Central Africa that, depending on where you draw your boundary lines, is a river and swamp system roughly 30 to 50% the size of the continental United States. Today we're discussing Emela-Ntuka. The name Emela-Ntuka originates from the Lingala and Bamitaba languages and translates directly to killer of elephants. This name is synonymous with other titles used by surrounding tribes like the Aseka Moke, Ninjago Gunda, Ngamba Name, Chipekwe, and Irizima. It should be noted that this is arguably the second most famous African alleged living dinosaur, with the most famous being widely known as mokele-mbembe, which is allegedly a living sauropod dinosaur which resides in a similar region of the continent. However, this is not that. This is not a sauropod dinosaur. This is something that is rumored to have a somewhat long neck, but nothing like a sauropod long, only elongated in the sense that you might say that perhaps a buffalo has a longer neck. And it is known to have a horn on its head. The cultures which make up this region are almost entirely based on oral history, and based on their accounts, knowledge of this creature dates back many centuries. In the West, however, 1930 is about the earliest documented encounter, in which one was allegedly killed in Dongao on the Ubangi River. It was not specifically named by a Westerner until 1954, when a former Likwala game ranger, Lucien Blancau, described it in the journal Mammalia as being larger than a buffalo and noted its elephant-killing behavior in the Likwala wetlands. Earlier accounts, like that of J.E. Hughes in his 1933 book, 18 Years on the Lake Bangweulu, describe a matching animal killed by tribesmen on the Lapula River. Subsequent explanation by people like Roy P. Mackerel and other 1980 to 1990s individuals collected dozens of consistent eyewitness accounts from multiple ethnic groups. Most reports indicate that this individual represents the size or slightly over the size of an African bush or savanna elephant. This portion brings us to a very important note that I want to speak to, and it is simply that many people, including people who tend to not be into cryptozoology and tend not to be, I guess, what you could call cryptozoology affirming, if you'll allow that term. They tend to be people who are very critical of the cryptid claims around the world. Many people recognize that this is a consistently claimed creature throughout the cultures of Central Africa. It really would be quite an uphill battle to claim that this is not the case. And because it is so widespread in its claimed witnesses and the encounters of the people of the region, many people who are critics claim that this is simply some kind of wood rhinoceros, some kind of rhinoceros that lives in the swamps, and rhinos of the savannah, as we know, love to wallow in and roll in the mud and even spend time in shallow water. They really have nothing to fear other than elephants. And so this is something that seems, at least at a surface level, fairly likely that some type of rhino that is perhaps existing in low numbers, or at least has until recent history, and is perhaps died out at this point, or is nearly extinct, has adapted to live in even more swampy regions and in more heavily forested regions. Now, one of the big problems here is the general description, which we're going to get more into. First of all, this is way too big to be a rhino already. Rhinos are not the size or bigger than elephants. They're actually significantly and recognizably smaller than elephants, to the point that it is basically a known fact around the world that every time an elephant or a grown elephant and a rhino come into conflict, the elephant is going to win. Contrast that against the Emela-Ntuka, which is known to slay elephants so much so reliably, so easily, you could even say, that its very namesake reflects that. On top of that, though, there is an even bigger and more glaring issue. For the people who recognize that this is a claimed creature that the cultures of the region recognize and try to hand wave and explain it away as being a rhino, it is consistently said to have, yes, a horn on the head like a rhino, but a long and powerful tail. This is something that absolutely rules out any type of rhinoceros that we know of and looks a lot more like the dinosaurs that we know of. We'll get into that more in a minute. As far as the traits of appearance, it is known to have a massive barrel-shaped body supported by 4 thick stump-like legs with heavy straight limbs. It's supposed to be smooth, hairless, and brownish gray, almost like an elephant-like texture. The head and neck are said to be powerful, slightly elongated and thick, with a specifically large head and some kind of small frill or sometimes claimed to be floppy ears up around the top of the neck or the bottom of the head. There's supposed to be a single, prominent, long, slightly curved horn on or near the snout. The tail is consistently stated to be long, heavy, and something like a crocodile, although it is noticeably shorter than that of the claimed sauropod mokele-mbembe. The neck frill is said to have something like 3 ridges on the back of it, and I will be putting a picture of a carving which represents this on the screen. As you can see in these carvings and depictions, some of them done by indigenous individuals, some of them done by individuals inspired by the consistent description of Emela-Ntuka, this is basically nothing like a rhinoceros. The similarities start and stop at the point where we establish that this is something that is big and has a horn on its head. Beyond that, there are so many details here that make it clear, from habitat to its physical appearance to its capabilities, that this is not a rhinoceros. And if this is some kind of rhinoceros, it is so amazingly adapted and different than the rhinoceroses that we are familiar with that it is basically just as amazing as if it were actually a literal dinosaur as it is claimed and widely believed to be. Now, despite its plant-based diet, it is known to be of an extremely foul temper with an extreme aggression, specifically towards elephants, hippos, buffaloes, or humans that enter its domain. And with its huge horn, it is known to disembowel its victims. However, as a herbivore, it leaves them there, leaving evidence which has been claimed to have been witnessed by both indigenous and Western individuals of its violence, and it does not eat them. Lastly, on description, it is said to leave footprints that at least appear to be 3 large toes. The reported range of this animal goes from Central Africa, primarily the remote rainforest swamps, rivers, and shallow lakes of the Republic of Congo, especially the Likwala swamps near Lake Tele, Mfondu, Ipena, and the Umbangi River, with reports extending into the southeast Central African Republic, possibly northern Cameroon, and the Lake Bangweulu region in Zambia. It is specifically reported as being semi-aquatic, inhabiting dense, inaccessible wetlands, and can submerge most of its body while feeding or resting in or near the river. Now, for my money, Emela-Ntuka sounds not like a rhinoceros, certainly not like a rhinoceros, but also not like any type of ceratopsian, nothing like a triceratops or any of the lesser known breeds of ceratopsian. I think that the people who are barking up this tree are also incorrect in their estimates of what this would be. I think that this sounds a lot more like some kind of hadrosaur. Emela-Ntuka sounds to me like a small to medium-sized hadrosaur that has survived in the forests and swamps of Central Africa. The size fits. The footprints that would look like 3 large toes fit. The tail fits. The elongated neck and head, which are rather large and powerful but not quite as long as something like a sauropod, absolutely fit. The aggression, from what we know, depending on the hadrosaur, could definitely fit. And most specifically, what I think is the biggest check mark on this list is that hadrosaurs are known to have diverse types of frills and horns on their heads. I'll put several on the screen right now. Now let's remember that what we have in the fossil record represents a fraction of a percent of what actually lived on planet Earth. For every horn and frill that we observe, there are probably 5 to 10 that simply weren't preserved, that we haven't been able to observe because we don't have any known surviving bones or fossils of those individuals. Either way though, hadrosaurs certainly have what would be and could be described as 1 large horn on their head and or frills up near the base of their head and or the neck. And this is to say nothing of the fact that we have very little idea what soft tissue would have looked like and existed around the hadrosaur's body, specifically the head and neck. If they had any type of decorative flaps or frills like what lizards and frogs have today, these would almost certainly not be preserved in most of the fossils. And again, the fossils represent a very, very small fraction of what existed in reality. Bill Gibbons has some good work and some documented cases of the Emela-Ntuka on his channel, and I will go ahead and link that down below. But this was a brief profile and overview of one of the claimed dinosaurs of Africa, which is, I believe, the Hadrosaur Emela-Ntuka. That's all for today, guys. Have a good one.